Hey, sorry, my light was on the fritz there. Anyway, I saw the TV glow because I was watching I Saw the TV Glow. It was more of a movie theater screen, really, but someone's got to make the bad joke. Yeah, so this is a first impressions vlog. I just got out of the theater an hour or so ago. Have not read anything or any theories concerning this movie or anything. I just really wanted to make this after seeing this because I was really affected by this movie in a way that a lot of movies don't affect me. And I love the channel Dan Olson. He often does these right off the cuff vlogs about bad movies in his case, but what I think is a really good movie in my case. If you couldn't tell that this is an impromptu vlog by the way that I'm using my phone for audio like I'm about to die in a Resident Evil game. I think. I've never played Resident Evil. So yeah, this movie, I went into it having just seen the trailers. I didn't actually look up anything about it. I wanted to see it because it has these vibes, very analog horror vibes, very Midwestern Gothic vibes, which are both things that I'm quite into. So I thought, if nothing else, it would be at least a fun aesthetic ride, right? Because a lot of movies lately, like, you know, Saltburn and The Sweet East are really, really marketing themselves on their aesthetics, which I guess movies have always done. But I was a little concerned going into it because I could tell from the trailers that it used that sort of creepypasta standard story about like, oh, there's an old cartoon that we used to watch when we were kids, right? That was really dark and like way too dark for kids, and now no one can find a copy. But I'm kind of into creepypastas, so that seemed like my stuff as well. So I went in almost completely blind except for the trailers, and oh my gosh, it was much deeper than just the aesthetics, and I'm so glad I saw it. I'm definitely still processing it, and so I'll just kind of recap the plot here. The idea is that there are these two characters. Oh, what's his name? I'm such a professional. Yeah, Owen, played by that really promising kid from the D&D movie. Owen and Maddie, who are two kids in like middle high school who both stumble upon this show called The Pink Opaque, very sort of strange, uncanny name, which no one else in the story seems to watch. And, you know, the glimpses that we get of it are very off in kind of overt ways, but also kind of subtle ways. Like it looks really low budget and the dialogue isn't really what you would expect. But, you know, they kind of bond over this strange show that they both love watching, and kind of start to grow up together as, you know, Maddie enables Owen to watch more episodes by taping it for him on videotape, because this takes place in the late 90s. The original start of the story is in 1996. And as they grow up, you know, they have one or two sleepovers where they watch the show together and kind of bond over it. And as they're growing up, it becomes clear that their lives are very, very crappy. They have SLS, shit life syndrome. Owen has seemingly an abusive father, and Maddie seemingly has an abusive stepfather. Not seemingly, it's confirmed in her case. And they both, you know, have this sort of ennui about their lives that they really want to get out. And they feel like, Owen says at one point that the TV show feels realer than real life, which is something that feels so real for so many people I know and has definitely felt real for me at points in my life. But they, at one point, the situation with Maddie's family gets so bad. This is weird because I have a roommate named Maddie, so this is real weird. But the situation with Maddie's family gets so bad that she decides to run away. And they plan to run away together, but then Maddie just disappears. And Owen is left on his own, and he's always been kind of a spacey kid, but he really like retreats into himself after this. Fast forward 2 years, no, that's before Maddie disappears. The second time jump is 8 years. So after Maddie disappears and Owen is left on his own, there's a time jump of nearly a decade where he gets done with school. He starts working as a movie theater worker, fittingly enough, since basically his entire childhood has been this strange show that has just consumed his whole childhood, The Pink Opaque. All of a sudden, as he's in the doldrums of his like mid to late 20s life, which has not gotten any better, his father is still alive and seemingly abusive, and he, is just marking time in this job. Um, he suddenly runs across Maddie again, also in her mid to late 20s. And she seems very shaken up and is seemingly in possession of this great secret, which comes out in the twist. It's not really a twist because it's clear that they were going somewhere like this, that she believes that they were originally the characters from this show, and that the show is the real world, and that their real lives are the fake world, and that they have been trapped in what they call the Midnight Realm, which is supposedly the real world, which to them is really nothing but suffering. And they have to get back to the supernatural world of the show by basically killing themselves. The story goes that in the show, the antagonist, Mr. Melancholy, removed their hearts and buried them alive in a way to trap them in this prison of the real world. And Maddie says that she has gotten back to the show by burying herself alive, or hiring someone to bury her alive. And she is trying to convince Owen to do the same. She is trying to convince him to let her bury him alive beside the football field where the stoners smoke weed. And he has this struggle with himself where he clearly feels some pull inside him that this is true in some way, but also has a resistance to that. And you think that maybe he's going to accept this, and they're going to, it seems to be leading toward this moment where they wake up in the show, and they have this big confrontation with the big bad, and face their demons and everything. But the bigger surprise in the movie is that he just doesn't. He refuses the call. He runs away, and she doesn't come back for him. And he just keeps getting older. And the third time jump in the series, it goes 2 years, 8 years. The third time jump is 20 years. And this was the most crushing part of the film, because in this segment, he's in his 40s now, late 40s probably. And he has gone from working at this movie theater that has at least a semblance of something he cares about to working at this children's play place where he's always celebrating kids' birthdays and feeling himself get older and older. And he has these monologue bits where he talks about how time just keeps getting faster, and he just tries not to think about it. And that's something that Maddie says also, that time seems to be going too fast. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with time. And Owen has this moment early on where he says, I know there's something wrong with me. And Maddie says that she feels the same, which, at first you maybe write off as they're high schoolers. Every high schooler feels like that. But as the story gets deeper, you wonder whether it's not something deeper. And it culminates in this really gut-wrenching scene where Owen is being hounded to sing happy birthday to this kid, and he just has a full-on breakdown in the play place. And this 40-year-old man just, well, I don't need to go into it, but it's gut-wrenching. And it's played so well because the other characters in the scene just sort of seem to go sort of catatonic, even the kids. And it's ambiguous whether they're just reacting to Owen creating this scene or whether it's, some kind of a glitch in the matrix, if you will. By the way, I really like how the movie shows some of the characters' repression and trauma coming out in physical illness in their bodies. Like, for example, Owen's mother, who is pretty clearly abused by his father, develops cancer and tragically dies. And then Owen, as we see him age, he seems much too old and frail and skinny for a man in his 40s when he gets there, which is very realistic, and I appreciated seeing. I don't know if it was deliberate, but I, I appreciated. But I've been doing a lot of reading about how. But I've been doing a lot of reading about how mental trauma and repression can cause physical illness. And I like it when I kind of see that pop up, which it's one of those things that once you know about, you can't help but kind of see it everywhere. If you want to know more of that, check out The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And there's really fun visual stuff the whole way through, blurring the line between the show and reality. And there's this amazing monologue scene that Maddie has, where she just lays out everything that she has done, this struggle that she has had to get from the show back into the from the real world to the show back into the real world, which has involved killing herself twice. And the whole production has a kind of deliberately stylistic suck to it. It has the VHS filters, and the CGI is deliberately not picture perfect, and it really makes that work to the fullest, I think, because when the CGI is hokey and dated looking, it really just adds to the uncanniness and unnaturalness of it all. There's one scene in particular with the villain, this computer generated man in the moon that just takes up the entire screen, and they really use it to the fullest, in a great homage to Voyage to the Moon. And the movie ends off, the pretty much final scene is of course the most interesting, and I know that there are going to be a million, the ending explained industrial complex is going to have a field day with this one, but the ending is that, you remember I said that the villain supposedly took out their hearts of the character when they were originally the characters in the show. So in the final scene, Owen, 40-year-old Owen, is having an asthma attack, and he's had asthma throughout the entire series, but it's gotten worse as he's aging, in a parallel to him being buried alive supposedly in the Pink Opaque universe and struggling for air as he's slowly dying, which is what Maddie was also doing when she was trapped in the Midnight Realm, the real world. But in the final scene, he's having this asthma attack, and he takes a box cutter and slits open his chest. And as he goes to the mirror, his chest bursts forth with static and light and glitchy VHS effects. And then the most surprising thing of all, the very last scene is him just putting on his clothes and walking away again. He walks back out through the play place and apologizes to everyone that he sees. I'm sorry for how I acted before. I'm sorry for before, for when he broke down during the Happy Birthday song. And that was, I understood right up until the ending. It did succeed in perplexing me, because obviously, one is not meant to read these things literally, right? So there's some very obvious allegory going on here The most apparent of which is a trans allegory. One of the characters is canonically trans. The writer and director is a trans woman. And there's a very queer undercurrent running through this of the two characters in the Pink Opaque, the show that they grow up watching, are both women. And they're women with a very close friendship. One of these friendships in fiction, which is, could maybe be read as romantic. It's very, very, a very, very close friendship. And the idea of these two characters being originally these strong, powerful women and being reborn and having this sort of journey of remembering and escaping from this nightmare realm or midnight realm of this real life of depression and melancholy into who they were supposed to be all along by metaphorically killing their old selves so that they can be reborn as these beautiful idealized versions of themselves. And this is obviously very explicit with Maddie. She is discovering who she was always meant to be and trying to get Owen to realize that too. And if you read this as a trans allegory, then Owen has that part of himself too. And I use the pronouns him because that's how he identifies throughout the movie, allegory aside. But that he has this part of him too, but he has pushed it down so far and repressed it. Obviously, he's had to repress it because of his abusive father, that he is not able to realize it. And eventually, it's too late for him. And this tracks with the villain being called Mr. Melancholy, because, depression and self-hatred are these things that keep people from realizing their true selves or their gender identities or whoever they're meant to be. See, this is why I'm really drawn to transmedia. I think there's something so universal about it, no matter who you are, in that it's not, it's not always a story of self-discovery. You can have trans characters in media which isn't about their journey of self-discovery, but I love those kinds of stories because I feel that they are so universal, that there's something universally applicable about moving past limitations and self-hatred and judgment to be the person that you want to be. And that's why, in some ways this allegory is kind of troubling, that in Owen's final scene, it could be seen, I'm sure this is not what they're going for, but I think what they're going for is metaphorically killing the old you and being reborn as this new person. But Owen's scene is where he slits himself open with a box cutter is very deliberately evocative of suicide. The characters literally commit suicide in order to shift between the worlds. And I do think the film is very conscious about trying not to be read as in any way glorifying suicide, especially not suicide of trans people, which is maybe why this ending is so interesting and a bit confusing to me. I'll admit I haven't reached a final interpretation of it. There are two possible readings that I see to this. So when Owen cuts himself open and oh, by the way, this whole trans allegory is strengthened by the fact that part of the blurring of the line between the show and reality involves Owen putting on a dress that one of the characters in the show wears. So there are two potential readings of the ending that I could take, which is, number one, that when Owen cuts himself open and releases this this thing, he's just imagining that. And we're just seeing what he wants to do. And then he pulls himself together and continues living his lie out in the place. I don't find that a satisfying ending. I don't find that a metaphorically satisfying ending. because I mean, yeah, that is what a lot of people do, but I don't. For one thing, the movie has played with a lot of things, a lot of blurred lines of perception and fantasy and memory. But one thing I don't think it's ever done is the fake out of showing what someone wants to do and then snapping back to what they actually did too. I consider that usually a cheap move, and I would consider it kind of cheap in this ending. What I think is the more likely reading, well, what I think is the other possible reading is that he does open himself up and release the soul of the soul of his character in this show, Isabel, and that her soul, for lack of a better word, does exit his body and goes back to the pink opaque, and um, and then it's just his body continuing to go about its business in the real world as the soul of Isabel is where she's meant to be. But that reading doesn't really make sense either, because when Maddie originally escaped back to the pink opaque, it's not as if her body was still walking around, as far as we know, in the real world. She disappeared for nearly a decade because she was in the pink opaque. Um, so neither of those readings completely make sense. And what I don't want to think is that the writer was just trying to avoid the implication of ending on an implied trans person's suicide as kind of a happy ending, because that reading is something that, because that could be a valid reading. The idea that the only way that Owen can be who he's meant to be at this point is in death, which I don't think is the intended reading. It isn't a reading I like, and I think they were trying to avoid that reading. Um, I don't like. I don't want to see the ending as trying to have its cake and eat it too, with the dramatic suicide evoking scene and then also him walking away. But I can't get a clear reading given that those two things happen back to back. So more research is needed. But I just found it so evocative in general. I mean, it's a pretty simple story, but one that really gets at a real texture of real life, in that, especially this period of feeling like there's something deeply wrong with your life and feeling like the time is passing too quickly and feeling like life isn't real. And I know so many people, myself included, who felt that way during COVID. And I feel there's something deeply important about telling these stories about discovery of self and discovery of what really matters to a person and what can help you get back to the life that you were meant to lead. I really like the Pink Opaque. I'm going to leave it at that. It was, and the aesthetics worked so well with it. This blurry, indistinct space of memory and nostalgia and youth and growing up. And the music also worked great, very evocative of 80s and 90s. Really conspicuous musical guests, which I liked. The movie did take a good amount of time to focus on, just the music and the vibes of it all at times, but I didn't mind that. It was certainly more than its vibes, which is more than I can say for recent movies like The Sweet East, or I think Saltburn had a little less. Highly recommend it. I hope this movie haunts me for quite a while, and I hope you see it and it haunts you too.